In the world of medicine, patients place absolute trust in their doctors, believing them to be guardians of life. But one British physician shattered that sacred trust and became known as the most prolific serial killer in modern history. His name was Harold Frederick Shipman, a man who appeared to be an ordinary family doctor but secretly carried out a killing spree that claimed the lives of more than 200 of his patients. Harold Frederick Shipman was born on the 14th of January 1946 in Nottingham, England. He was the middle child in a working-class family, and his early life seemed unremarkable, except for his particularly close relationship with his mother, Vera. This bond would later be considered crucial in understanding his psychology. Vera Shipman suffered from terminal lung cancer and died when Harold was still a teenager. He watched closely as doctors administered morphine to ease her suffering, a treatment that left a deep impression on him. Witnessing his mother's deterioration and eventual death instilled in him both a fascination with medicine and perhaps a disturbing association between morphine and the control of life and death. Shipman pursued medicine, studying at Leeds School of Medicine and graduating in 1970. He quickly began practicing as a doctor, but early in his career, he showed troubling behavior. In 1975, he was caught forging prescriptions for pethidine, a strong painkiller, which he had become addicted to. He was fined and briefly sent to rehab, but the incident did not end his medical career. He managed to return to practice and rebuild his reputation, eventually establishing himself as a trusted general practitioner in Hyde, Greater Manchester. Patients appreciated his availability and his willingness to make house calls, which was becoming increasingly rare at the time. To his community, he seemed like the quintessential family doctor, caring, dependable, and attentive. Beneath this image, however, Shipman was carrying out a chilling series of murders. His method was disturbingly simple. He would administer lethal doses of diamorphine, a medical form of heroin, to his patients, usually elderly women, and then falsify medical records to make it appear as though they had died of natural causes. Many of the deaths happened in patients' homes, often when Shipman was the only one present. Because of his position and the general expectation that elderly people might die suddenly, suspicions were often brushed aside. Over time, he refined his technique, becoming skilled at covering his tracks. Families often praised him even after the sudden loss of a loved one, never realizing that the doctor they trusted was the very cause of their grief. For years, Shipman's murders went unnoticed. He blended so seamlessly into the community that his growing number of deaths seemed coincidental rather than sinister. However, the sheer volume of fatalities connected to his practice began to stand out. Local undertakers noticed that Shipman's patients were dying at unusually high rates, often sitting fully clothed in chairs rather than in bed, which was unusual for natural deaths. Yet, despite these observations, no formal investigation began until much later. The lack of immediate suspicion highlights just how much trust was placed in doctors and how unimaginable it was to think that a physician could deliberately kill his patients. The case that finally raised the alarm was the death of Kathleen Grundy, a wealthy 81-year-old former mayor of Hyde, who died suddenly in June 1998. Shipman claimed her death was due to old age, but suspicions arose when her daughter, Angela Woodruff, a solicitor, discovered that her mother's will had been changed shortly before her death. The new will left nearly her entire estate, worth hundreds of thousands of pounds, to Harold Shipman. Woodruff, who was certain her mother would never have made such a change, reported her concerns to the police. Grundy's body was exhumed, and toxicology tests revealed lethal levels of diamorphine in her system. This discovery became the key piece of evidence against Shipman and marked the beginning of the end of his long career of hidden murders. Once the investigation began, the extent of Shipman's crimes came into horrifying focus. Police reviewed medical records, death certificates, and patient histories, uncovering a disturbing pattern. Shipman had been present at the deaths of an alarming number of patients, and his falsified records often noted symptoms that conveniently justified morphine use. Experts determined that he had been killing patients for years, possibly since the late 1970s. Estimates of his victims vary, but an official inquiry later concluded that he may have murdered more than 250 people, making him one of the most prolific serial killers in recorded history. Most of his victims were elderly women, though he did not exclusively target this group, and the sheer scale of his killings left families across Hyde devastated. Shipman was arrested on September 7, 1998, initially for forging the will of Kathleen Grundy. But as the investigation unfolded, he was charged with multiple murders. His trial began in October 1999 at Preston Crown Court and lasted until January 2000. He faced charges of murdering 15 patients and forging Grundy's will. The prosecution presented overwhelming evidence, including medical records, testimony from experts, and the forged will. Families of the victims listened in horror as the details of his crimes were laid out in court. Shipman himself remained calm and emotionless throughout the proceedings, showing little remorse or acknowledgement of the devastation he had caused. In January 2000, he was found guilty on all charges and sentenced to life imprisonment, with the judge recommending that he never be released. Even after his conviction, questions lingered. Why did Shipman kill so many people? Was it a desire for power, a compulsion, or something rooted in his childhood experience of watching his mother's suffering? Psychologists and criminologists have debated these questions extensively, but Shipman himself never provided answers. He denied his crimes even after conviction, never admitting guilt or explaining his motives. His silence left investigators and the families of victims without closure, forcing them to live with unanswered questions about why their loved ones had been targeted. Shipman's life in prison was marked by the same cold demeanor he had shown in court. He served his sentence at Wakefield Prison in West Yorkshire and later at HM Prison Franklin in County Durham. On January 13, 2004, the day before his 58th birthday, Harold Shipman was found hanging in his prison cell, having taken his own life. His death sparked renewed anger and grief among the families of his victims. Some felt robbed of the chance for him to face continued justice, while others expressed relief that he could never harm again. The government later faced criticism for allowing him the opportunity to end his life. The aftermath of Shipman's case had a lasting impact on British medicine and the way doctors are monitored. A major public inquiry, known as the Shipman Inquiry, was launched to investigate how he had managed to evade detection for so long. The inquiry, chaired by Dame Janet Smith, concluded that Shipman had killed at least 215 patients, with the possibility of many more. It criticized the failure of medical oversight systems and led to significant reforms in the monitoring of doctors, the certification of deaths, and the handling of controlled drugs like morphine. Shipman's crimes became a turning point in patient safety and accountability, highlighting the need for stronger checks and balances in the medical profession. The legacy of Harold Shipman is one of horror and betrayal. He exploited his position of trust to carry out unimaginable crimes, turning the doctor-patient relationship into a lethal weapon. His victims were people who had trusted him with their health and their lives, and in return, they were betrayed in the most horrific way. The story of Harold Shipman remains a chilling reminder of the dark potential that can exist behind seemingly ordinary facades, and it continues to be studied as one of the most shocking criminal cases of modern times.